Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'm Parna, the host of Beyond 1 Million Fireside Chat. In these segments, I have candid conversation with founders and experts who've built, battled, and broken through the 1 million to 5 million barrier. My guest today is Chris Stephenson, head of AI strategy and operations at Nuix. Welcome, Chris. It's so great to have you on our show.
Hey, Parna, so great to see you, and thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, Chris, you and I have worked together. We've known each other for a long time. We've worked together in two companies, the last one being Topus Labs.
Yeah,
And a lot has happened since, right?
absolutely. Yeah. So we were acquired back in 2021, and we were an AI company, of course, based in Boston, founded in Boston. And as we know, as we were just chatting about earlier, AI has certainly taken an interesting trajectory. So both from an entrepreneurial level and an AI level, it's been a very interesting few years.
For sure. So before we dive in, I would like to talk a little bit about the world of AI as we see it today. Like you said, AI is not new, but it is the new right now, and everybody's talking about AI. Everybody is an AI company. In your opinion, what is so new about AI that everybody's buzzing about it?
Well, I think you need to go to November 22 when OpenAI released ChatGPT. I think that was a big eye-opener for a lot of people. That's really where my sense is that AI became the mainstream name. It's what people were talking about at the Thanksgiving table. They were not doing that even 6 weeks prior, or a year prior at that Thanksgiving table. So and that really put AI into the hands of the average person, which in an easy format, it's much like the Google page did, where it just gives you a screen and you type in and magically information flows to you. Now you magically have access to, a very smart robot that can produce things and in many ways write more eloquently and, as we say in Boston, wicked smarter than you can often do. And so it captured the minds and hearts of many people very, very quickly. And I think AI has shown, according to a recent stat I saw, it took 10 years to achieve for social media to achieve the consumer adoption that we've seen with AI in just 2 years. So it's truly remarkable in terms of its capturing the consumer. But now we're talking about turning that corner and making business return on investment, which is really that next frontier.
Yeah, no, for sure. I remember this was, I think, more than 10 years ago. One of the first panels that I had hosted on at a conference was demystifying AI.
Hmm.
And since then, like you said, now everybody can use AI.
Yes. And that's the slippery slope. I mean, and we could take the whole podcast, so we don't want to do that, the whole discussion, but just to put a fine point on it, the same thing happened with social media. People felt like, oh, I'm a techie now because I'm using Facebook, right? I have access to all this information and I can communicate to anybody. And these chat bots have, I think, lulled many people into a false sense that they are now programming and they're controlling their own destiny. And frankly, their prompts as input is just more is more data. Like, again, someone said if the product's free, then you're the product. And I think we're seeing the same thing happen with AI. So just a cautionary note there that the different generations interestingly use AI in very different ways. So yeah, fascinating. So we'll actually have to do a separate one just on AI, maybe as a
I totally agree with you. Yes. Let's put a pin on this. We'll come back and do another one on AI because I'm sure we both have a lot to say about it.
Absolutely.
All right. So our topic is entrepreneurship today. So you have founded a couple of companies and maybe more. So tell me a little bit about what made you want to be an entrepreneur.
Well, what's interesting about it is it never felt like that was the goal. It was very organic and opportunistic, is what I would say. The first time around, and frankly, I go back. to my early childhood when, just working. Well, sometimes we were too young to actually have a job, that would be based on the laws in Rhode Island at the time. And so at 11, 12 years old, I had a paper route and I was mowing lawns. And it didn't occur to me until I recently looked back and I thought, okay, I was doing this like a long time ago and never really thought about it that way. But in this case, my first, I was working for a business and my boss and I at the time decided to start our own business together. And so it was a little bit of I got pushed a little bit out of the nest by someone else. So it was not just me kind of going off and myself, but it was kind of two people forging their way to trying to do something a little bit different. So that's what, I got kind of talked into it a little bit, and but I've never looked back.
That's great. Could you then be called an accidental entrepreneur?
I think that is a very good description. Yes, yes.
Great. So one of the challenges founders often have is validating their business idea because you and I both operate a lot in the startup world, and we've seen founders struggling they have this awesome concepts, but then how do you validate it? What would be your tip to help these founders validate their idea early on?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it depends on the nature of the business. So our first one out of the gate was a services business, IT services. So IT consulting, however you want to describe it. Outsourced IT, outsourced help desk, that sort of thing. So it was very service oriented. And my business partner and I actually had founded a side business that was operating at night and weekends. And so in that particular case, the market was kind of telling us because there's this really interesting point where we actually had a growing group of clients, but only one of us was able to spend time on those. The other was traveling for business. And it got too hot and heavy, and there was too much going on. And I had young kids, or I had one child and one on the way. And I said, this is too much. I can't have a job, a commute, and do all this. So we literally told our customers, sorry, we're no longer going to be able to do this. What was very interesting, what happened next is that a month went by and we got calls that said, please, please, please come back. We're not getting good service from these other folks. We just need your help. No one did it like you guys did it. And that time around, we said, all right, there's something here, right? So in this case, it was a little strange. I mean, I guess we had proven ourselves. We had, gotten the sense that customers needed this, that there was a pull, but we didn't realize how much it was until we realized that that whole small business market was not being served at all, and people were starving for this assistance. So that's what gave us the push and the gumption to say there's something here. So we never really did a formal business plan. It's not something I would suggest you go and just don't do a business plan. But at the same time, if you have proof points like that, like people are writing checks and begging you to come back and serve their account, that was enough of a tell to kind of get us in. It certainly didn't make it easy, but it certainly made it easy to make that decision.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Sometimes you don't need a business plan. It's when the clients come to you, then you know you have something
That's
to
right.
offer. That's for sure.
Mhm.
In terms of revenue, even though, as you said, you didn't have a business plan, but you also had to grow your company, what would you say was your turning point or a point where you realized that you've reached 1 million, now you need to scale it? So,
Mm.
with that realization, how did you plan, or were there any specific areas of investment that allowed you to grow more?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because the level of revenue, although it's a milestone and kind of an indicator, it's sort of an arbitrary number, really. It's just more depending on your business, what you're doing, if you're, selling lipstick or if you're, doing IT services, the number is less important than the sense that you have turned a corner, right? It's having that antenna up. It's understanding, the market and the model and if it's fitting. And you get a sense that we've stagnated or, we're at a point now where we need to change things a little bit and shift to your point. So it's understanding it's kind of that you need to, as a founder, you need to be very cognizant of your business and you'll get a sense. There's no instruction manual, but you'll get a sense. Okay, we need to, recapitalize or we need to shift in some way. And our turning point, what we did is we recognized that as a services business, you can get stuck in the doing. And so and it's very easy because as a founder, you have more cachet, more credibility. People want to have you on their account, right? Well, that only, as you recognize, as a carbon-based life form, back to the AI thing, there's only 24 hours in a day, and somewhere in there you have to eat, sleep, and say hi to the kids. So you realize that to scale, you now need to replicate yourself. And to do that, you need to become more of a leader, more get involved in selling much more, and a lot less in the doing. And you sort of wean yourself off of that and replace yourself, which is sometimes hard because sometimes we want to be clingy to those important accounts. But I think when you do it honestly and you do it with the customers in mind and say, look, I'm not going to be here every day. By the way, you can't afford my rate because it's going up to X. You help them in different ways to opt out and to understand that in order to service this account, we're going to need a team of people, not just one. So you go through strategy. So it was that shift from, billing and operating at a customer level to more leading and selling and driving and replacing myself and my business partner. Also partnerships. I think at that point we recognized that as a small business to have the credibility, the cachet, we began to establish strategic partnerships, and Microsoft was a critical one at that time. We were able to kind of come in when they were in a transition in how they were doing it. And then I think the only other thing was sort of collapsing around verticals. Suddenly, at $1 million, you recognize, oh, there's some things that we can actually do to build more credibility in this space and begin to customize our solutions around a particular thing, venture capital or advertising or whatever it might be. And it's recognizing that. So those are the types of things that we did at that stage to scale both person-wise, but also revenue-wise and customer focus-wise.
Right. So you were talking about replicating yourself. Could that be the toughest challenge you faced as a founder, or there were others?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about it is a lot of it can be ego driven. If you get in your own head that you can't be replaced, or what happens when I'm replaced, that you sort of somehow there may be this sense. But that for me wasn't a big one because I like scale. Like in my head, I like helping in doing things, but I like doing things that I can replicate and do and make a big difference across a broader community, whether that's charitable giving or doing work. Yeah, I think I'm just cursed with this need to always scale things out. So that wasn't the biggest challenge that I had. I think the biggest challenge I had was the balancing fundraising, doing and selling and trying to figure that out. So, in the first business, it was a little bit different because it was structured differently. But in my other businesses that I founded and started and ran, it was no revenue to start. So there was a combination of meeting with investors, selling the dream, and meeting customer expectations, doing presentations, proposals. It became very hard to split my time and figure out where the energy was best spent. And again, you get this battle between raising money and selling stuff. And I remember I had a great conversation with someone. We were walking our dogs, and I was whining about this very thing. And he said, you know what? Just sell stuff. I was like, why are you chasing all these investors around? And I realized that's actually, so I realized at that point that I had been spending too much time fundraising and complaining that, I wasn't getting the traction when the traction really needed to be, people writing checks again. It was almost brought me back to a shift. So there's also this element of mentorship and getting feedback from others because it really can pull you out of a rut. But I think as a founder, my biggest challenge was very much that is it which suit of armor am I wearing in what situation and how do I balance that?
That's definitely a tough one, especially when you're small and you're trying to do it all and sell and make money and raise funds. And it can be definitely a challenge, but you've obviously mastered that craft. Look at where you are now. So tell us a little bit about Topos Labs as far as how did you know that your exit strategy was going to be an acquisition, and how do you prepare a
Mm.
startup for acquisition?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think every entrepreneur, to a certain degree, or at least we did, has an idea of the trajectory of the business. In this particular business, we recognized we were a natural language processing company, and so we didn't intend to go battle Google and Watson and all these companies, but we wanted to get in their grill, and we wanted to prove that we could do it better, and that and no one wanted to do the a 10-year thing where we're, trying to scrape out 0.01% with a, group of people around a table. It was really about finding some premier customers, proving the value and exiting. So that was really known from the founders from the beginning. It was set up that way. Now at the same time, you never want anybody who's going to buy you to know that's the goal. So there was a combination of always looking at a venture opportunity to recapitalize that way. Always willing to just sit and stay where we are because things are going well, and always willing to. So we always had to have those on the table because the best laid plans never survive first contact with the enemy, as we know. So the whole idea from the beginning was, yeah, we're going to get some premium customers, and we're not going to battle the titans here. We're just going to look for good opportunities when they come along. So that was always known. At the same time, you need to make sure that you've actually done the work to get you into that position to begin with. So your second part of your question is, the most important, right? How do you position yourself and prepare the organization for that kind of for an exit? And I remember this was an eye opener for me because I was a late coming co-founder on Topo, so I wasn't around during the early prototype stage. I was brought in once it got serious enough where they needed a CEO, and so I had been unaware of things like the different licenses for open source software that can be used inexpensively, if not free, for quite a bit of time when you're building the product. But when you then need to turn over the keys, it suddenly looks like a vulnerability when you have, once a company buys this, they're going to have $1 million a year, to license it, right? Whereas we've been operating in this, hey, everything's free, isn't this amazing? So there was the preparation on the IP and the the licenses, the vulnerabilities, if you will, the liabilities on software licensing. We had Ukrainians working on the team and so there was a code consolidation. Where is our code? Making sure that I know a lot of small, startups and so on are leveraging offshore and overseas development, which is again great. It gets you going, but then where is the code held? Making sure that collecting and consolidating that IP, making sure that it's in some sort of a code locker. So those sorts of things began to need to be done, right? In order to start thinking about like how is a company going to view us? These are things I'd never really had dealt with a enterprise level software company.
Right. So would it be fair to say that the one of the biggest place that a startup, especially a software startup, needs to focus on prior to an acquisition is making sure that their IP is all set?
Absolutely. I mean, again, why are they looking at you, right? So what are if you go to buy a house, you have an inspection, right? And so someone's going to come looking at the finances. It's not, there's this novel concept that they're going to see what you're doing and go, this is amazing, we'll just take it sight unseen. But there are people that do the X's and O's and have to look at risk. And if they're a publicly traded company, even more so. So, where is your data held? Where's the IP? Is it truly IP? Is it protected? What are the risks? Right now, do you have people in a war zone that are key to the company? Like if they're cut off from the internet, are we out, all of the key people, which fortunately we weren't, but those are the kind of things that you want to get in order. Another thing to prepare is who are your key people and have if they're trusted, have some conversations with them about would you come along, if that's the plan here, because again that increases your valuation or decreases depending on what happens with that. So you've got a few different key things that are I think that are important to driving the value in your business that are going to be important to the buyer. So if you want to maximize that outcome, you really want to, check all these boxes before you go in. And the last one I would say is we actually did a deck. We did a pretty intensive deck that was almost like a pitch deck to a VC, but it was to the buyer to get under the hood and to share what's the magic sauce underneath this technology, why it's interesting, and why we can do what IBM can't as a 15-person company, right? So it's recognizing what's special about your business and then making sure that you can make that pitch consistently so that again, you drive up the value and the recognized, novel nature of your business.
So I suspect that you spoke with a few companies, a couple, if not more, about potential acquisition. As you were having these conversations, were there any quote unquote red flags that you said, oh, this is not the company to acquire us? Were there like specific things that you were looking for? Because in the long run, it is a partnership. Once you get acquired, you become part of that company. And I'm sure there are things that you or your other co-founders kept in mind to say, okay, this is the right fit for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of it is kind of just the standard human relationship stuff, right? So in early discussions, what are those interactions like? How are these people treating each other? How are you being treated during the call? Does this feel like a partnership, arrangement where there's a mutual sharing of, or does this feel like, sort of a kind of a brutal takeover and it's going to be kind of our way or the highway? So there's those kind of things. But what was interesting, one of the organizations that we didn't go with early on, and it was hard because it was one of the first ones, and we were kind of feeling, initially pretty excited about it, was that there didn't seem to be any awareness internally or no alignment on the executive team about what they were actually buying and where it fit into their stack. So we did not get a good feeling there. It just it was one thing if it was one comment here and there, but it began to occur to us as we went through the process that there wasn't a deep alignment here or awareness of what they were going to do, and so the sense that if we get into an earnout situation or something came up that it was not going to go well, and we just weren't, the timing wasn't right, there wasn't a good fit. So those are the sorts of things. Is there alignment at the executive team about why they're looking at you, or are they just kind of trying to take you off the table as some sort of a power move, but you're gonna, we've seen this happen a lot too, kind of eventually just disband you and throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so if depending on what you're looking for, if you're just looking for cash and run, well, that's a little bit different. But if you're looking to be a part of an organization, those are the kind of things that I think you need to keep in mind.
Really good points. Any lesson that you've learned through the acquisition process that you could share that would help our audience be better prepared or know what to look for?
Yeah, here I don't want to have people running for the hills, so I got to be careful how I put this. But
It's candid conversation. They need to know the truth, right?
so if let's put it this way, I'm going to make a terrible comparison because I'm not a woman and I've never had a child, but I can only imagine that it's the difference between the what a woman goes through to have a baby, to birth a baby, and the magic and love that comes afterwards. So if it's a good, basically, if it all goes well and you do get acquired, it can be an extremely rewarding thing for the rest of your life. That's the payoff. Just be aware that it is one of the most challenging things you'll do as a founder. And I think the reason is, or at least that's what I experienced, and I've talked to several others who found that as well. It also depends on the nature of the company, the structure of the business, how complex it is. Is it a publicly traded company? Ours was in a foreign country, and we had a complicated cap table. So it was a whole, and we had Ukrainians, and so there was a lot, right? So what I never realized was that in the scheme of everyone that we had that works at the company, I couldn't afford to have anyone spend time on the due diligence and what was really needed to answer the questions because I needed to make sure that we still operated a business in case it didn't go through. So all of a sudden I had another full-time job, which was basically do whatever the due diligence process required and keep this on the rails while I kept the business running as if it was never going to happen. And so you can immediately see that that split is, I'm glad I'm a Gemini, but that split actually was very challenging, and the amount of work involved fell to me for the most part. And so all I can do is say, prepare for that because who are you going to take? Your best salespeople or your engineers off the line to do this? No. And who else is there to do it? Depending on how big your company is. Mine was, pretty small, so basically 95% was me, and that was so the tip I would say is just be prepared for that. Go in knowing that, and then again, you'll have a beautiful bouncing baby boy or girl, and it'll all be good.
Excellent analogy. So before we wrap up, what's the one tip you'll give to an entrepreneur who is looking to grow their startup to 5 million and beyond?
Okay. Yeah, it's a great question. Again, I go back to the first statement I made that, numeric dollar amounts, while interesting milestones, and they're data points, they can be rewarding. I think oftentimes they become more obstacles than anything. So I guess the first thing I would say is stop thinking about $5 million dollars as soon as you possibly can, because not only you probably are putting a limitation on it than you are making it a goal. Because when you strive to make a specific financial outcome, you are not doing the things very interesting way. You're probably not paying attention to the things that are actually going to get you to that and beyond it. So my sense here is throw the $5 million thing out, run a successful business, and focus on the thing that is the most important thing, in my opinion, which is the business model. Optimize your business model. Who's paying you? How does that, how is that if integrated into the business in a meaningful way? Stay close to the customer, number two, and ensure your people are motivated and inspired. If you can do those three things, great. But if you have to focus on one, your business model is your ticket. Now, I've heard this from multiple VCs. They'll take a mediocre idea, they'll take a team that can hold their own, solid team, needs to be a good team, but their number one thing is business model. It's look, how are you going to make money, right? And if if you have the most amazing idea in the world, even with a great team, and the business model isn't there, it's just not going to work. So I guess my focus would be less on the 5 million and more on those other three things, particularly the business model. And you will hit and go beyond the 5 million. So to me, holding that out there is rather limiting. And again, celebrate it when you run by it, but don't hold it out there as the almighty because 5 million with 6 million in expenses is not it's not very helpful.
For sure. These are really great tips. Great tips, Chris. Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I have a huge huge soft spot in my heart for entrepreneurs. What you've done, Parna, is inspiring and amazing to me. And anyone who goes out and does this is, in my opinion, kind of a heroic and inspiring figure. So all I would say is enjoy the ride and, stay strong. I think the one thing that I will always that drives me crazy to this day is the ideas that I had in my head that I talked myself out of because no one else is doing it, or when I say it to people, they don't understand what I'm saying. And then I look back and I'm like, I was ahead of the game. Like it was actually my idea. I could have written a blog on it. I could have named it and owned this thing, and I didn't. And then I let the kind of the market just figure it out. And then I go, 5 years ago, 10 years, literally 10 years ago, that's where I was headed. So you probably have ideas in your head or things that you talk yourself out of all the time. And I would just say, at least some of the time, give those a second thought because sometimes the world has to catch up with you. It's not just you being nutty, and so that authenticity can often be your success factor that you're missing. So you listen to your gut.
That's a fantastic advice. Listen to your gut. Thank you, Chris, as always. Great insights, and I'm sure our audience will get a lot of value from this conversation. I appreciate your time.
Not at all, Parna. Thanks. We'll talk soon.